for joining the CSNP March webinar. We're here with the SCYTHE CEO, Bryson Bort. The webinar is Starting Your Own Security Company. We're really excited to have him here. If you could please join us on the CSNP Discord. The invite link is in an email from Zoom, Meetup, and Eventbrite. So I'll just let Bryson take it away.
Okay, starting your own cybersecurity company. So it says feel free to comment with ideas and questions in the doc. I'm going to share this Google presentation with everybody afterward, and I welcome you to continue to, comment and put in more things. So you don't just have to do the Q&A here, which we'll do at the end of this session. We'll be able to do it afterward. So let's get ready to go on our entrepreneurial journey together. So I'd like to dedicate this presentation to both of my dogs, and this kind of ties into the entrepreneurial story. So on the left is Shiloh, who was a rescue from Hurricane Katrina, and she was put down in my arms on the day that I actually did the official launch of what was called Project Crossbow, which is what now is SCYTHE. And then on the right is Cali, who just died in my arms the other night. And I'm sharing that not only to highlight their memories, but also to highlight just how hard this journey can be, because no matter what we have going on in our personal life, we still have to, as entrepreneurs, push forward and keep our commitments, including giving these kinds of presentations. So this is dedicated to both of them. An entrepreneur is someone who will jump off a cliff and assemble an airplane on the way down, which from a vet perspective sounds like a Marine to me. So who am I? I have been around, I've done a lot of things, and I would say my qualifications are is I've started 3 different companies. I started a services company, a consultancy called GRIMM 11 years ago. From GRIMM, I was approached by Target in 2016 to build them a specific tool. I realized that a large company like Target asking me to build a custom tool was the equivalent of product market research. They'd given me the idea. They had done enough of, if we need this, then other people are going to need this. And so that was where what we called Crossbow, which became SCYTHE, which is a product company that I currently, I've raised $22 million of VC funding to date, and where I currently work with Elaine and run that. In addition, I co-founded a nonprofit called the ICS Village with Tom Van Norman, and that is a 501c3. So I've done a services company, a product company, and a nonprofit. Legal disclaimer, I'm not a lawyer. This is not legal advice. I'm not even the best entrepreneur out there. So let's start. Why do you want to do this to yourself? Just like I was talking about the example with both of my dogs, you are not going on this journey alone. Your family, your friends are a part of this journey. And so when we talk about wanting to do this to yourself, the asterisk there is you need to have this conversation and understand that social support that you are going to require. Being an entrepreneur is a 24/7 job. This is not 9 to 5. You may not be physically working, but your mind will always be responsible and will always be working. And that is something that takes a toll. It is a very selfish quest that you have to do, and you need to know, and you need to have this conversation with your partner, with your spouse, with your friends, that they're going to understand that. I can remember when I first started GRIMM, I pretty much disappeared from talking to all of my friends for the first 6 months because I was so buried in the idea and what it needed. And it's still a challenge today with my social circle, where they know. It's like, oh, that's Bryson. Bryson's always somewhere. Bryson's always talking. Bryson is always working. He is traveling. I pretty much live on an airplane. And so my friends know that and get that about me. So this is the starting point, is having that conversation and understanding that expectation. The second is recognizing how the psychological roller coaster of what you're about to go on. When you first start the idea, I can remember January 22nd, 2013, I had gone from being somebody important in government to nobody. I was a team of one. GRIMM was one person sitting at a coffee table in my living room going, now what? But there was all of that excitement, right? You have the initial enthusiasm. It's the honeymoon period. And the honeymoon period lasts about 3 to 6 months before the reality of how hard this is. The reality sets in. Because whatever idea you think is the idea is not going to be the idea that actually is just 100% works. And that's where reality comes in, is the learning. And learning is hard because it means you are going to be failing. You are going to be told no. And you fight so hard for that first yes. And then you start to figure out how to get that yes at scale. That's when things start to work. And that's when it begins to take off. For a services business, I would offer it takes about 2 to 3 years to work through that to what would be the equivalent of product market fit, which obviously is for a product company. And then in a product company, it can be any period of time. At Scythe, it took us I want to say about 6 years of research and development, working with different prospects, thousands of no's and meetings until we started to really understand what our market was, what we needed to build toward that market, and then executing it. So these are just general timeframes to consider because not only are what you're going to be doing and what that requires, like I said, this selfish quest, but also how long and what that's going to feel like. So to be an entrepreneur, I believe really only requires 2 attributes. And you'll notice on here, being intelligent and good looking is not one of them. It starts with passion, right? Do not become an entrepreneur because you want to make money. That's not going to work. Because when you are back on that curve and the reality and the hard parts, money is not going to be what gets you out of bed. Money is not going to be what you're able to look at your teammates and say, let's keep doing this. It starts with passion. There needs to be an idea that it bothers you. It drives you nuts. It drives you crazy. It is an itch that it does not exist in this world. How can this not exist? That is your passion. The second part is the reality of what it takes to run a company, which is you need to have tolerance for BS. You need to be able to handle all of the administrative costs. Everyone sees the glamour of being a CEO and a founder, and the reality is you are also the janitor. You are the one who has to clean up. The buck literally stops with you. If you don't do it, no one else will. Other example, I now know health insurance in all 50 states. I guarantee you, I have zero interest in knowing how health insurance works in all 50 states. But my job as a CEO requires me to know how health insurance works so I can effectively provide that and those benefits to take care of my teammates in the herd. So these are the 2 factors that you need to have to be an entrepreneur. What makes a successful entrepreneur? So there are 3 components. Of course, it starts with the founder and the idea, right? You are the crucible for this passion and this idea that is going to go into the world. The second then is the team. No one goes it alone. No one can scale that way. It's just not possible. And so your team is a significant part of what makes this idea a reality and out there. And then the third part is something that a lot of folks don't talk about, which is timing. Timing of an idea. I will again use the example of Scythe. Our idea was ahead of its time. That is not a good thing. This is where we get into in MBAs and academia, everyone's always preaching innovation. Innovation means you are coming to somebody with an idea that, if it's truly innovative, they don't understand. The best metaphor I've ever seen for this was when Henry Ford was building a car and they were talking to him about, well, why didn't you go and talk to farmers who at the time were using horses? And he's like, well, they're just going to tell me to build a faster horse. True innovation was a car, which to a farmer who's never seen a mechanical device and only knows horses, I mean, how do I even translate that in my mind? I mean, so wait a second. It's got these things called tires. Those are rubber horseshoes. I don't understand, right? This is where timing comes in, is if you are that ahead, market education, just explaining this idea to people is going to be a lot of work. And let's then walk through what that means in terms of sales cycle. So if you don't even know something exists, then your company has definitely not budgeted for it. So in the best case scenario, I have a fruitful conversation with somebody who, let's say, actually has budget authority, because that's where most of the conversations go, are with people who do not have budget authority. So in this perfect scenario, I meet an executive, they have budget authority, they understand the idea, they love the idea, and they can see the value proposition, how the idea can help them. Well, how long does it take for them to get that in that budget cycle? It is highly unlikely that they're going to be able to shift their priorities in the year. So in our best case scenario, where that all lines up perfectly, you're probably 12 to 18 months out from a successful sale and a truly innovative situation. This is where the idea of being a follower is good. And this is important because a lot of folks have that passion, see that idea, and then they get discouraged because they see other people doing that idea. That's a good thing. That means there's a level of market validation and market education that has already happened, which means it's easier for you to sell because you don't have to do all that education yourself. Tying it to Scythe, when I was, so 2016, Target came to me. We started co-developing it with them at GRIMM. I asked to keep the intellectual property because I wanted to invest and take this to market. And I spent 2 years going out and talking to folks. And I realized I was ahead of our time because, again, it is a truly innovative solution. Almost nobody understood it. But also, I didn't understand because I approached it from an engineering point of this is what it is. Well, what something is not a value proposition. And so I realized I needed help. So, and we'll get to that on the raise stuff. And yeah, so that's that. Okay. This is from one of my friends, Tara Wheeler, who of Red Queen Dynamics, and she was texting me. And she said, "When did I switch from engineer brain to CEO brain? It's like I have the attention span of a gnat." It was like, "Welcome to having to think of everything all at once, constant surprises, and the most context switching ever. Your brain needs to be flexible because, again, your scope is everything." As a traditional employee, your scope is going to be, as an individual contributor, what you do. As a team leader with individual contributors, your scope is kind of just in that piece. As a CEO and a founder, your scope is the entire company. It is everything. And that is hard. So this is the most fundamental economic piece to understand. Anyway, so this blows me away that folks don't get this, and this is why this is so critical. A services company and a product company are the two economic models of anything. And this is important because, of course, money is the lifeblood of your idea. If you don't make money, your idea is not going to make it. Services are people-based. 1 hour of work equals 1 hour of revenue, right? It is time-based to a person. You can only work so many hours. You can only charge so much per hour. That's it. And so you scale by the people. Products, you're buying a value. And it's it's not tied to level of effort. You could spend 1 minute on something, you could spend 10,000 hours on something. In fact, one of my favorite stories, and I told this at the Sands Difference Maker Awards when I won the Global Innovator Award in December, was a story of Picasso, where he was sitting at a table with a friend, and the friend was like, "Hey, I'd like to commission. Could you do an art piece for me?" And Picasso, in about 30 seconds, quickly scribbled something, a picture on a napkin, and said, "That will be $10,000. And the friend was like, "Wait a second. I mean, I just watched you do that. That took you 30 seconds. Why would I pay $10,000 for that?" Picasso said, "No, that took me a lifetime because that's the value of his name and what he can create. That's product value." So in summary, services, people, time-based revenue, product, whatever a customer deems it's worth, which is important. Ted Dimopoulos has written a great book. So the rest of this presentation is primarily going to be on the product view because that's where most folks typically think about entrepreneurship. Ted has written an excellent book. If you're interested in more about how to build a services consultancy, I highly recommend his book for more detail. So tying this to cybersecurity, this is one of the reasons I like the story of Target is the birth of modern cybersecurity. When we look at cybersecurity as an industry, it's really effectively about 20 years old. And the reason that I make that supposition is that firewalls were not really common until around 2000. Before that, firewalls came into existence roughly in the early 90s. We had some really lightweight AV, and that was kind of it. So 2000 is about when we see cybersecurity really exist as an industry. And that was kind of it. We had AV, we had firewalls. We were pretty much like, well, my network is different from your network. That's a win from a security perspective. In the breach of Target in 2013, that all changed. And this is fundamental because the business side understood the value proposition of increased cybersecurity. And if you look at all of the investment and the what I call the Cambrian explosion of all of these product categories, this ties to this moment. This was the watershed moment where executives across the world in all verticals of enterprises said, oh, that could happen to us. That's what you nerds have been saying. We need to do something about that. So I think this is key because it really ties to the fact that our industry, the modern version of it, is about 10 years old. So products. There are a lot of them. Momentum Cyber puts out a cybersecurity almanac every year. I encourage you to look at it. Going back to what I talked about the Cambrian explosion from Target, these are the market categories for products. And this is important because when you are ideating and thinking through, well, what do I want to do? You will want to understand what category you're looking at doing because that then starts to tailor in what's the maturity of that category, what's the addressable market, how do the major analysts, Gartner and Forrester, look at it, because that's a lot of what's shaping the industry perspective. A lot of folks poke at the Gartner Magic Quadrant. There are customers who buy literally from that Magic Quadrant. I can tell you from my personal experience, I remember when I completed my raise in 2018, well, as I was going through my raise and completed in 2018, that's when I discovered I was in a market category. I didn't know that until I was doing the raise, because then I had folks be like, well, aren't you breach and attack simulation? And I was like, what's that? I haven't heard of that. Oh, hey, there's other people doing this. I didn't know that either. I had started just from that idea from Target in 2016, and I'd been co-developing and building it and going out and talking to people, and I didn't even realize I was in a category. And it took me 18 months of competitive intelligence, because we all know how difficult it is to sift through what marketing says something is versus what it actually is. And as I went through and really understood each of my competitors, I started to see a trend of they all had basically come at it with the same architecture and solution, and I had created something different. And I will tell you, as a small, non-revenue generating product startup, Gartner does not care about that. Because I would have this argument with Gartner analysts when I was trying to talk to them. And I was like, well, you've defined the category this way, but these folks are this, I'm this, it's a different value proposition. And they were just kind of like, sucks to be you, right? Because they're not going to change that. But this is key because this is your market research that's going to ground you. And again, competition is not a bad thing. Seeing that there is a category means you are now following in something. The education and the budgets have been set for you. You're not going to have to go through that long sales life cycle to build that from scratch. So what is the idea? So many folks have these ideas and they're afraid to share them because it's like, well, someone else is going to take it. I need to be like this. And you can't. So again, when we look at what are the components of a startup company, the founder and the idea are that starting point. Nobody else is you. If somebody else can do your idea better than you, well, then that tells you something, right? Your passion, your view of the idea is the most important starting point. Do not be afraid to share it because there's no way that your idea can get anywhere if it doesn't get beyond you. The other part is when we talk about this, an entrepreneur, while it is a lonely job itself, is not a lonely work execution. You are constantly networking and talking and sharing your idea and getting feedback. So you need to talk to people. You need to talk to more people. And here's the coolest part. My network is so large from the last 11 years compared to what I had in the previous part of my career because of all of the folks who are willing to introduce me to other folks that they know. Don't be afraid to ask, hey, I've got this idea. Who else would you recommend I should talk to about this? Your friends, your acquaintances, people don't even know you well, want to help you. That's so cool that you're on this journey and they believe that. And that was something I didn't realize is how many folks in this industry love the innovators, love the entrepreneurs, love the folks who are at the front lines, because in cybersecurity, right, this is an unsolved problem. And so the folks that are on the cutting edge of this stuff are bringing things to bear that are changing the game. And so they will help you. And by talk, I mean listen. And this is one of the hardest things because it's your idea and you're so passionate about it. And no, you don't want anyone to tell you your baby is ugly. You don't want there to be any flaws. You need to be open to constructive criticism. When I closed my first major financial, they are a global financial, they're one of the biggest in the world. That took 6 months of iteration before I even got to the point where I could be in competition for the RFP. And it started with a conversation with somebody who I had met at a conference, and we started talking, and I pitched him on where I was on the idea. And he was like, he came back to me and he was like, the answer is no. And I was like, well, why? And he listed the things. And he's like, these things need to be in it. I worked on those. I came back 3 months and I was like, okay, I built these things now. Now what do you think? And he said, no again. And he gave me more things. And I came back 3 months later and I'd addressed all of the things that he told me that he had wanted and that he didn't like. And he's like, oh, this is actually pretty good. Let's talk now. And that became a procurement. So listening and being open to that is what's going to improve what you need to do. The best tech doesn't win. It comes down to those relationships and that trust. So many folks think that it's my product needs to be up here and this is where my competition is, and oh, they have so much more. People are investing in you and your team. It's a trust thing. I'm not buying that I expect your product, if you're a startup, to be exactly where I want it to be. I'm buying in because I know you'll work with me to get it where I want, and we both win from that. And that ties to then what your value proposition is and how to grow that. And so the concept here is identifying from all of these discussions, what is minimum viable product? Minimum viable product is what are the set of features for that value proposition that are the minimum that I need to get to, our team needs to get to, for somebody to be able to buy. Those initial customers will be like, that's enough. Like the example I gave with the major financial, that was enough for that to work. I have a vignette here where one of the first salespeople I hired, he'd worked for a very large company that you would all know. And I remember he commented to me and he's like, this is amazing. This tool works. And I was shocked. I was like, wait a second. Of course it works. Why would my MVP not work? Why? I mean, that doesn't make any sense. How would people buy something? And he's like, you don't understand. Most products don't work when they are first purchased. And I was just blown away by that. He's like, yeah, it took a year after we were selling to customers for our tool to work. And I couldn't believe that was the way it is. But it is, because again, it goes back to they understand that. They're buying into you and that trust and what you can do for it. So the other part of this is it's really weird when you get to that first, somebody actually gave me money for this idea. The reality is here and we've got it. So be your own devil's advocate. Challenge what you think your thing is, and know that everyone else has had this idea and succeeded or failed, right? This is where we talked about market research. Know your competition, know the lessons learned, try to understand where if somebody else tried this and it didn't work, why? That doesn't mean it was a bad idea. Again, it could have been timing. It could have been the founder. It could have been the team. There are a lot of these factors. Try to understand that so you don't make the same mistakes. Starting with your best friend forever. This is common, right? A lot of folks, I want to co-found with somebody that I like. Formalize that understanding. What are your roles? What are your expectations of each other? And the most common area of that becomes fraught in the relationship is typically around equity. And it's the start of like, well, there's two of us, let's just start 50-50. If there's three of us, let's start with a third each. You don't have to do that. I recommend based on expectations, because life happens, right? Somebody who had these expectations after a year, turns out that they're kind of like, I'm not quite into this. This isn't working for me. Something happened in my life and I need to go get a job and make real money right away. And if they own half of your company, that's going to be a problem. So you can delay what the equity is based on folks actually executing to those expectations. Let the performance drive what you're doing. Because what if things change? And then together, talk about what success looks like. And just like everything in security, because security is a process, not a destination, consider these formal things that you should do on a regular basis. So my recommendation would be quarterly having these co-founder conversations and continuing to adjust expectations, giving each other feedback, highlighting where you are disappointed or where there is encouraging things, and keeping that together, because this is a lot like a marriage and it can get really ugly in the divorce. Some pearls of wisdom from Alyssa Miller. Write down your vision and mission early, like we're talking. Why are you launching this business and how do you plan to achieve that goal? Then anytime you encounter a tough business decision where you're having trouble deciding, look back to your vision, look back to the North Star and mission, and choose the option that helps you accomplish those. All right, so incorporation. This is cheap and this is easy. Legal structures exist because that is the basic asset protection in how our court of law works. Check name availability. You want a name that is unique. You want a name that does not conflict. In fact, I was just getting a pitch from an an entrepreneur yesterday, and I didn't get a chance to tell him, but his company had a name conflict. There was already another company with that name, and I was kind of like, well, that's confusing. And you can do this easily. The other flexibility that you can have here is you can have a unique incorporated name and then call what's called DBA, doing business as. So for example, GRIMM, the legal name of GRIMM is actually SMFS Inc., and then GRIMM was our DBA name. You need to get an employee identification number from the IRS. These are both cheap and free, easy things to do. Then you need to now look at your state level because you need to register to do business in your state. So the legal part, the structure, and the IRS, that's the first thing you should do. The second you think you might have an idea, it doesn't cost very much. It's administratively quite simple. The state is something you're going to want to do once you decide to do operations. My personal recommendation, don't try to be clever. There are some clever ideas. Delaware, Nevada, and Wyoming each have some unique benefits. The most common that is used in the US is Delaware because of their business-friendly corporate laws, which is why if you look, a lot of public companies are incorporated in Delaware. That's why. From an administrative perspective, my recommendation, just register in your local state. You're going to have to register where you're doing business anyway. So now if you try to be clever, you're going to have to do 2 registrations, and it's just more administrative overhead. Be aware of whatever your county regulations are. When I started this in Arlington County, I was required to pay a forward revenue tax. So that was how Arlington worked. The another element that, again, is cheap and easy, actually cheap, it's free and easy to do, is set up a cage code in SAM and a Dun & Bradstreet DUNS number. These will allow you in the future to do business with the US government. If you're going, I will never do that, so what? It's easy to do it. And some commercial entities, their procurement systems will use DUNS numbers. So this is the legal simple things to do to build your company. Be aware of special designations, 5 of them here that you can take advantage of. There are different programs, grants. Some commercial companies, of course, the US government definitely does, sets aside money against these special designations. So that's a great way to get your company off and going. To raise or not to raise, that is the question. So if you are building a services company, you probably do not want to raise. This is why the economic model is so important to understand. Let's go back to that, right? 1 hour of time equals 1 hour of revenue. Let's say I raised money. So I'm building a consultancy. You give me $5 million. What am I going to do? I'm going to hire a bunch of people and then we're going to go and try to get them work. Build your consultancy as it grows, reinvest the profit back into hiring FTE and FTE. Also, it's easier to do the people management because you are maintaining your culture in a much slower and more direct and purposeful fashion. Now, if you're building a product, you're probably going to want to raise money because products require a significant amount of research and development and incubation period before I can get to minimum viable product, which is my first opportunity to get revenue. Using the example of SCYTHE, it took, I want to say 3.5 years of research and development before we got our first revenue producing revenue from a customer. So I had one advantage there. I had incubated it within my consultancy. So I was able to reinvest profit from the services consultancy into the research and development of the product. But then to truly be able to launch that product, this is where I brought in Ron Gula from Tenable and Dmitry Alperovich from CrowdStrike to do our initial seed raise in 2018, because I needed more capital to be able to focus on truly being able to take this to market and to support that. And you're going to find some tensions over time as you try to incubate that inside of a consultancy. The second part is, again, I assume most people recognize those names, and if not, you definitely know who Tenable and CrowdStrike are. CrowdStrike being the most successful public cybersecurity company of all time. When they give you money, they're going to return your phone calls, right? I didn't know what I was doing. I'd never launched a commercial software product before. And I had access to folks who had been there, done that, and not only gotten the t-shirt, they'd IPO'd. So that wealth, that knowledge, those networks is tied into what you're getting from bringing in a raise on the product side. But there are different types of investors, and this is something that takes a while to figure out. So the two types of venture capitalists are going to be funds and private equity. Private equity tends to be much later stage, so I'm saving you time. If you are a pre-seed, seed level entrepreneur, you do not want to be talking to a private equity person. And they don't care that you shouldn't be talking to them. That's their time. So your time is valuable. Save yourself. You're going to be wanting to talk to funds. There's also the idea of angel investors. So angel investors, like I'm an angel investor. I am currently invested in 10 companies. I'm about to close my 11th investment this week. And from an angel perspective, right, I've been there. I've done some amount of this. I really like the opportunity to help the next generation, to help folks build up their company. Full disclosure, I'm invested in Red Queen Dynamics with Tara Wheeler. And so this is, but I'm not going to write you $1 million check. That's not what an angel does, right? Angels are smaller checks, just like friends and family. So it's enough to get you started, right? You've got this idea. You're sitting there going, when do I quit my job? Collecting 50 to 100K from, a handful of angels is an easy way to kind of step out and start that with lower risk to beginning. And then as you're able to start to focus on the idea outside, now that it's your full-time job, you're building it, you're getting progress, you're having these full-time conversations and that feedback, and that starts to lead to a larger, more formal institutional raise from a VC. There are two other options here. One are incubators. They represent there's a whole different kinds of incubators. So something to be aware of in your local area. They'll be there to help you with the ideation and building the idea and connecting you. And then last is the US government. So the CIBR program gives out grants for you to build your idea. The typical grant is going to be $50,000, and it's a non-equity, which means they're not buying, they're just giving you 50K to prove it because the government thinks that might have value to them. And they can build up to very large sizes. So this is another effective way to not dilute your equity, get some cash to start to build out the idea. So being an angel, right, as we described this, if this is something you're interested in, right, maybe being an entrepreneur is a bit of a risk, but being an angel allows you to participate and support the entrepreneurial ecosystem. Starting point. You're building the next generation. You are not running it. You are not the entrepreneur. You are helping them. You are giving them cash. You don't get a vote. How to become an angel investor? You've got a network. You've got to build your own deal flow of talking to these folks and having them come and talk to you about their ideas. My recommendation, invest in what you know. Just like an entrepreneur should pursue their passion, as an angel investor participating in entrepreneurial ecosystem, I recommend that you invest in what you're passionate about, which tends to be something you're going to know. Otherwise, you might find yourself buying beachfront property in a swamp in Florida, right? You are vulnerable to that because so much of this is paper and ideas, and there's trust in this. As an angel, you want to be thinking in increments of $25,000 on average. Now, this of course doesn't apply to everyone. There'll be some places where maybe that's $5,000. I tend to think of this as 25,000. And then there's the potential as a qualified investor, you can in fact repurpose your IRA for these investments. Again, I'm not a lawyer. Go and talk to your accountant and look at that, but that is an option to being able to do this. All right, so you're going to raise. We're going to do this. We're going to step out. You need to build a pitch deck. A pitch deck is your short, 30 minutes at most presentation on what's the idea for how anybody would invest in this. Step one, the problem in one slide. Do not spend 5 slides explaining to me why cybersecurity is a requirement. I got it. What is the particular problem you are solving within that in one slide? If you're spending more on that in the problem, you're taking time from the solution. I got it. There's a problem. Move on. Now the how. How does your solution solve that problem? This is several slides, right? This is the meat. This is what the idea is. Third now is proof, right? Do you have proof? And this is something that's really cool. Remember I was talking about how there are a lot of folks out in industry who are really wanting to help startups. They'll be design partners. They'll be beta customers. Hey, Wells Fargo, would you be willing to do a beta with me? I just want to like do this. I want to kind of test. It's not quite fully featured. It's free. Like I'm gonna work with you. And you can find someone who'll say yes to that. And that has a lot of value at this point, right? Yeah, it's not revenue, but at the beginning, we're not talking revenue, we're talking idea and the buy-in of that idea. That the fact that somebody is willing to commit resource and time to helping your idea says something, and those logos mean something. I am amazed at how many people do not put this in their pitch decks. It drives me crazy. You've just spent all this idea time telling me what the problem is, how you're fixing it, and proof of what you're doing, and then you don't know what to ask me for, right? What are you raising? What do you want? Do you want $1 million? Do you want $100 million? These are important questions, right? How much money and what are you going to do it? That needs to be a slide. Again, I'm surprised how many pitch decks do not have the what am I asking for? And then the final piece, which ties from the funding, is the vision. What is the schedule? What are the milestones? What does the minimum viable product look like? What are you going to be doing with that? And then I put this as an asterisk, as an addition. Again, since founder and team are so important, being able to show that, I think, really goes a long way to an investor really understanding that. There's a link. The summary of this pitch deck comes from Ron Gula, who is an active investor in cybersecurity. All right. So with pitching, you are going to be doing it over and over and over. It never ends. You need to be doing it on planes, trains, and automobiles. Anybody that is captive to you, pitch them. Random person on the street, hey, have you heard the good news? Do it. It's going to be awkward, but here's 2 things that are going to come from it. One, you've got to learn to have an extroverted side. I am actually naturally an introvert. It took me a long time to get comfortable with being able to do that because I was just like, selling somebody, like, why would I do that? Forcing yourself to do it in uncomfortable situations will make you better at it. 2 will be the random connection in those where they are like, oh, that's a good idea. Hey, I know somebody. You never know. You need to be doing this constantly because that's how you're going to get better, because you've got to also train yourself on this journey too. So the process. This is from my friend Katie Masuris. Everything a cishet white male founder tells you probably will not work if you're not in that group. Now, this is the harsh reality of fundraising. It is an insular community, and it is incredibly insular. The majority of VC investment is out of Silicon Valley in California. There are other centers, Austin, New York, DC, and smaller ones. But generally, the big money is out of the West Coast, and there is very much a Valley bias. I'm an East Coast guy. I'm a national security guy. The West Coast folks did not like me. They just were like immediately out of the gate, like, you don't know what you're doing. There is a bias. They go with what they know. There is a patois. There is a relationship. It's very insular. The second part of this is the tech bros. And this is where, again, if you're not a man, you're going to have that kind of misogyny that you're going to face because there is very much a tech bro culture. It comes down to relationships. And when I started this stuff, I didn't have these relationships. I probably gave over 100 pitches to different VCs before I got my first yes. 100. I got 100 no's. I flew to random places to give 30-minute pitches to then be told no. It happens. It's the requirement. And over time, though, you will be building relationships as you do that. And it only takes one yes. So do not be discouraged by the no. Do not take it personally as they don't get your idea. There's a lot of factors that go into it. It's oftentimes hard to get a detail of why VC is not investing in you. They talk in very general language, but I'm just highlighting that this part, there are dragons here. It's not fair. It's kind of stacked, and it's problematic. So finding your people. Not every investment firm is the right firm for you. Take special consideration of who you're talking to, right? Just like we talked about a co-founder is like being married. When you bring in an investor, it's like a marriage as well. They are owning a part of your idea now. They are getting equity. They own a part of your idea. You really want to understand who they are, and not just what they tell you. Do your reference checks. Ask other entrepreneurs about their experiences. And do not just take the perspective of the name of the VC. Exactly which partner in that VC is going to make a large difference in what you're getting from it. And this can be one of those hardest moments, right? Like, go back to my story, 100 no's to that first yes. It's okay to turn down money. It's hard because you've done all this work and you finally get the deal sheet and you're like, but you're not the right one. I'm sorry, the answer is no for me to you. It's okay. It is much more worth that than getting into a business relationship that could lead to divorce with somebody that you do not want to work with and is not aligned with your values. You don't like them. It's not worth it. Don't do it. Addressable market. I love how artificial intelligence cannot do words. So addressable market is understanding that there are different customer types with different budgets tied to potentially different product offerings. In the beginning, you're going to have one product. Trying to do more than one product is going to be complicated. It's not that it can't be done, just generally it is not the wisest place to start. With SCYTHE, we were one product for most of the time. It's really only been in the last year and a half that we started adding additional SKUs where we now have multiple products, but we grew to that because as we started to understand the market, we realized there were different value propositions tied off of our core idea that we wanted to build. And this is part of moving from being just, no pun intended as I'm wearing a unicorn horn, a one-trick pony, to meeting multiple value propositions and demand. The most common mistake that folks do here is they look at an addressable market, right? I'm in this space, going back to the Momentum Cyber slide with the Cyber Almanac, and they go, well, if Uber is a $10 billion and I only capture 1% of that, then that's my addressable market. No. The other part of this is the feeling of like, why am I guessing at this when I'm going to go into a pitch deck and like they're going to know it's not exactly accurate. Of course, you don't have the data. That's okay. They're not looking for this is the right answer. They're looking for your thinking. How did you come to that? How did you build it up from scratch to tying to those specific dollar amounts and the potential number of customers to those specific dollar amounts to building an overall addressable market? Pearls of wisdom: don't be afraid to be original. Great companies are born out of original ideas and the innovative experiences created by collective greatness. Economics on the people side. People are not just their hourly salary. This is something often as an employee you're not aware of. There are all these different components that actually go into this. So when you're looking at going, I need to hire somebody at $100,000, that person does not cost you $100,000. That person probably costs you $135,000 because with the cost of their additional benefits, general administrative and overhead, there's an additional 35% of different things that it costs to have an employee. So just being aware of the people economics. We're going to skip through this stuff for time. There's a whole bunch of other things. The next step on your journey post-seed is the A round, and you're actually going to repeat through the similar where we talked about the reality and the trough, and so you have to build up. The same thing happens. You're going to have that initial honeymoon because the A round is the first time you're given serious cash for your idea. In my case, in 2021, SCYTHE was awarded $10 million. And it's not the money, it's now we can invest that in the people and the ideas that we're trying to do. That's so amazing because we were doing all of this work and we were stretched thin. Now we get to do it. And then you're going to go into the wilderness because the people part at scale starts to become a real challenge. And then as you grow through that wilderness, then you finally get to being able to execute. In my experience, that takes about 18 months. What I've been told by multiple VCs in the community is it's typically about 18 to 24 months for a company to grind through all of that to be able to go into just straight execution. Every month, you will face a random existential crisis that no amount of planning can prepare you for. You will get past it. You will survive. And at some point, they stop happening. And most importantly, you're not alone through that journey. Entrepreneurs will always help other entrepreneurs. If any of you are interested in this journey, you are welcome to reach out to me. Just recognize my time challenge. We will help you. It is the most exclusive club that will let anybody in because every member will help you. And then I do an annual founder webinar where we basically, instead of just bragging about how everything great is, we have founders talking about all the things that have been broken and everything they've ever done wrong. And I actually have found this probably the most beneficial talks that I've ever seen on entrepreneurship. So I'll be doing that again. These are the two from the last 2 years that we've done. Some additional resources to be aware of. Like I said, this presentation will be shared afterward and will be editable, or sorry, commentable, so you'll be able to reference it and tie in things. Don't give up and try, measure, fail, and try again. And then lots more vignettes from other founders. Questions?
Thank you, Bryson. We have a couple questions in the Discord. Someone asked, can you tell us the story of how you went from consulting for Target to your next paying customer? How long did that take? How did you do it? How close was that to a well-selling product?
So that took, so we co-developed with Target for 2 years. I spun the company out as its own separate company in the fall of 2018, and we closed our first customer a year later. And so how I was able to do that is because for us, now that we're a mature company, our enterprise sales cycle is about 5 to 6 months. At that time, as I was talking about, we had so much market education. The enterprise sales cycle was more on that 18-month time frame. And so what I came up with, because of the way I built the tool, is again, I see cybersecurity as truly a team sport, including an industry. No one company can solve it all. And with our tool being modular, I had wanted to bring in the smaller pen testing and offensive consultancies to be able to help build and support that. And so my first client was actually John Strand at Black Hills, and it was a handshake at the last DerbyCon. Was it the last DerbyCon? Yeah, I guess it was. And that was easier because one, it was relationship. It was a much smaller dollar amount. And there's so much in the sales component of just that first sale starts to then really build your confidence and your reference, and then you start to get more.
John Strand's awesome. Let's see.
I'm a big fan.
Then we have another question. Any recommendations for service-oriented startups?
Well, I'd recommended the InfoSec consulting book by Ted Demopoulos. That book is your Bible for that.
Thank you. And if you could go back in time, is there anything you would have done differently?
Yeah, so I'd reference the 2 panels that I'd done on failures. I cover in detail a lot of the mistakes that I have made, and I have made many. Some potentially even near fatal, but here we are, still going, still thriving. I'd say the biggest mistake I made was we talk about market, and what I originally built was a red team product. The red team market is $3 billion of people. There's almost no product budget. And so I effectively had built a tool for a market that did not exist. That took me several years to figure out and to pivot. I don't know, I haven't thought enough about what I might have done differently because that's hard to do. But I definitely know that not realizing that was a huge mistake that I had to strategically figure out.
Thank you. And then we have, how did you decide on your user personas?
Yeah, that's the networking conversation. You going to potential customers and you start to identify who those roles are. and then you start to see the trend of what those roles are, and then you start to identify, well, what do they actually care about with what you're doing? And so that ties to then being able to define what your minimum viable product is, because that's the list of features that match to these people who you've done that. For me, that took over 1,000 conversations, and I'm not exaggerating. It was over 1,000 conversations.
Oh, wow. Thank you for the endurance to keep going. Let's see. And then we have a comment from Andrea at CSNP. This has been fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing your experience and advice with us. And thank you so much for being supportive of those who are not in the club.
Uh, yes. One, thank you for the opportunity. I'm always happy to share this. I hope there are a lot of takeaways on how a business runs, even if this isn't something you're interested in. If you are, again, I'm more than happy to help. The Slack channel that I run through there is a future founders part of that, where future founders are able to interact with other entrepreneurs and all those pieces. And then as you start to build into becoming it, you graduate into the full Slack. I don't run that. That's just something I can help nominate you into. And then, like I said, barring my own time, I'm happy to help talk to anybody. And then, like I said, like I do invest, and I'm invested in. I'll be invested in 11 companies as of this week.
Wow, that's awesome. Let's see. Does anyone have more questions? See people typing. Mhm. Okay. So we love your unicorn hat. Thank you so much for, oh, yeah, and the unicorn shirts and um the site swag shop is awesome. There's actually we're all dog lovers in cybersecurity, it seems. There's quite a few dog bandanas and collars if you want to check out the site swag shop. Um, but
All of the proceeds from the swag shop go to charity. So just FYI, the Ukrainian section, all of that goes to supporting the conflict there. And then on the other side, it goes to the conservation for chubby unicorns, aka rhinos. So we work with a conservation nonprofit, and that's where all the proceeds from the swag store go.
awesome. Well, okay, I guess we have time for one more. If at a fork in the road between a traditional SDVOSB
Service
company
to a
dealing
veteran-owned small business.
company dealing with federal and defense contractors or VC investing, which would you choose?
Well, they're two completely different businesses, right? The SDVOSB is going to be a government contracting consultancy. A VC-backed idea is going to be a product idea. So you're not going to be an SDVOSB building a product off of government as a subcontractor to that. So because the prime is going to keep all your intellectual property, so that won't work anyway. So they're just two very different ideas and business models. Um, I frankly, I started as an SDVOSB government contractor. That was the origin of GRIMM. Probably the irony in that was for the first year, most of my work was just commercial odd jobs because it takes a long time to get into that system and turn that into regular government revenue. So most of my money, while it was tied to the defense industrial base with GRIMM, I mean, I was just doing any job we could get. I did IT management. I did proposal reviews. I mean, whatever I could get to keep the idea going to just until those things could catch on.
Awesome. I think we have, I said one more, but then two more questions popped up. So one is, have you faced any WFIO moments and how did you deal with them?
I don't know what WFIO is.
Yeah, if you could, Kelvin, if you could clarify what WFIO is. The other question is, what are the required certs for what you do?
No certs are required.
Is there a learning path or?
Well,
Um,
that was what we were covering
okay.
through the
Yeah.
presentation. I mean, it is on the job training and it is networking.
Hmm.
Um, and then that's where I decided to bring in VC investors because I
Hmm.
wanted to get the coaching and the help from them because I didn't know what I was doing. And I mean, I have an MBA. MBAs don't teach you this stuff. So, I mean, what I learned from my MBA is I learned what double entry account bookkeeping is, which great. Now I know that. And I know what the Black Scholes option modeling is, which I do not use ever. It's like, when's the last time you used calculus from high school? So, on the job, actually being able to talk to fellow entrepreneurs is going to be how you do this. There is no certification for it. On the services side, some of those jobs may require certifications. Going back to the SDVOSB requirement, the government is very particular about being qualified for what you're being contracted for. And so certifications absolutely can be a part of that. But what I do for a living now, I do not require any certifications.
All right. Thank you. Let's see. So I think you have a hard stop at noon. Um, but we appreciate you speaking with us so much. Thank you so much, Bryson.
Happy to help, and I will coordinate with you on how to share this presentation with everybody. Like I said, it'll be commentable. So if you have questions in the presentation, throw them in there. I will get back to you.
Thank you so much. And a lot of people are asking, yes, it will be recorded and put on the CSNP YouTube in a few days. And the slides will be on our website as well, and we'll throw that in the Discord. Discord will be our one-stop shop for all things CSNP. So yeah, thank you so much. I learned a lot. This was so valuable.
Thank you
Thanks,
again.
Bryson.
Appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Have a great day, everyone.